So I'm Nicholas Bornoulis again of Capital Link. I'd like to welcome you to a very interesting panel, the panel on entrepreneurship in Greece and on Greek success stories attracting international investors. I would like to thank Apostolakis for being extremely helpful in terms of putting this panel together, and of course Jimmy Athanasopoulos for moderating it. Before I'd like to thank Thanos, Nikitas, Alexandros, and Kevin, all of you guys for being here. Before turning it over to Jimmy, I'd like to say that this panel is of particular significance to me because I'm also an entrepreneur. So I have lived through the pain and the commitment and the hard work of building a company. I'm not trying to position myself as a success story like you are, but at least in terms of hard labor, I have been there. And so I'm really very happy to see this particular topic of Greek startups that have grown, have become internationally recognized and attracted significant investment. So thank you to everybody, and Jimmy, and the floor is yours.
But by the way,
thank you so much.
22 years and having Kyriakos on the previous day, I think that counts as a success, right?
Yeah. So good evening and good afternoon for those in New York. Good evening for those in Greece, Athens. Nicholas, thank you so much for the invitation. The distinguished panel gives me an honor to be here and the moderator of this panel. So Envolve, wearing the Envolve hat, I can say that Envolve is one of the 9 social programs of the Libra Group Social Responsibility Division. And these are 9 social programs, and the common denominator of these social programs is giving back to the community and provide, of course, support to those that need it the most. We do it through a series of 9 managed programs and initiatives which are broadly linked to the themes of community support and assisting people who have been denied or have limited opportunity. The recession Greece experienced was one more barrier, or maybe that opportunity for Greeks to venture out and really make a difference in Greek business. Since entrepreneurship is the lifeblood of our economic futures, Envolve, through its 3 pillars of support, propels very much, the very much needed of startups as a vital ecosystem of any economy. At times like this, it is all too easy to focus on how we can mitigate the immediate effects of the global crisis. How can we change or adapt our businesses? How can we take advantage of government support, for instance? But beyond this, there is one factor that will define our long-term economic prospects and truly enable us to look ahead with confidence, which is the main theme of this panel and this event. We need look no further than today's startup and early stage businesses. The entrepreneurs who had the courage and the confidence to take the risk and start something new, just when others were looking at ways to avoid that risk. In this panel, we see how Greece has been a relentless source of innovation and commercial courage, firstly, through our own economic crisis, and now amid a global pandemic. Greek entrepreneurs are an example for other nations to follow, a beacon that should be a natural attraction for inward investment. Envolve, as an organization that also runs a national entrepreneurship award program, is lucky to have a business startup barometer at its own fingertips. We know from the number of applications for the Envolve Award each year that Greek entrepreneurs do not give up and they do not let up. For them, a crisis is merely a challenge requiring a solution. As mentioned, Libra truly believes strongly in the twin values of hope and opportunity. Many of our programs aim to create an environment in which bright young people can develop skills and knowledge while working closely with leaders like my fellow panelists, knowledge and skill in the chosen field they have attained. Investing in the community is not just a matter of paying back with the fruits of commerce. It is good business in its own right, because a community with hope and opportunity is one better equipped to contribute to in tomorrow's world. Gentlemen, again, it's an honor to have you next to me digitally, and I have a series of questions. However, let's get to business. Kevin, the Greek market is undoubtedly a very small one for a startup to really scale up. Can Greek startup founders be ambitious enough to scale up and expand internationally? Should scaling up internationally be the norm? And your view is going to be unbiased and very objective before we talk to my fellow Greek Americans.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, very happy to be here. I've been going to Greece for 25 years, and then the last several years been involved with Blueground. And I've been to Athens to visit the company, and so started to learn more about the Greek entrepreneurial market as well, and been super positive. So I think there's enormous potential here. And the reason I think there's more potential, and I am the only unbiased person on this panel, is that the cost of engineering and the cost of talent in Greece is quite low relative to New York, where I come from, or other places, yet the talent level is very high. And so that's a fantastic combination. So the truth is there have been fewer opportunities for some Greeks over the last 15 years, depending on how the economy was doing. Many of them went to London, to other places. Many are coming back now. And so I think they're big opportunities. They've been educated in Greece or educated abroad. And so I think that we're going to see more companies like Blueground that start in Greece, start in the local market, but then expand into Europe, the United States, to the world. So look, some companies should be local, some should be focused. If you're a media company, maybe you're focused on the Greek market, but there will be other software companies, there'll be other services companies that are started in Greece and become very successful. And so can you hire, 1 million workers for your company like Amazon? No. But can you build up a 1,000-person company in Greece? Absolutely. And so I'm very optimistic.
A fascinating view. Kevin, sorry to go back. Can you please give us a very brief introduction of yourself before we go to Alexandros for his introduction and his views on this?
Sure. Sorry, I should have done that. So for 25 years, I've only been starting companies and doing some investing. So my internet career started in '96, launching a company called DoubleClick. Had thousands of people, was sold for billions of dollars to Google in 2008. Since then, I've started other companies like MongoDB, which is a publicly traded database company. It's now worth $20 billion. I started a company called Business Insider, which is the largest business news site in the world, and 12 other companies, many of whom are smaller because they've started the last couple of years. And then I'm also an early stage investor in companies. So I have investments in 30 different companies. We invest over a 4 or 5 year period about $200 million of my money into companies, mostly in New York, but increasingly around the world, and hopefully more in Greece.
Absolutely. Just a remark, you said that in your beginning remarks on your introduction, you said something about some investing, and then I heard a $20 billion valuation. So humbleness, as our leader, George Lopez says, is a trait of the great. So Alex, thank you so much for your views. Kevin, let's go to Alexandros. Alexandros. And a brief introduction of yourself, please, and then your views on my first question. I can always repeat that. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah, really excited and honored to be part of the panel. And also, it's been really great to work with Kevin. He's been fantastic to Blueground. So my background is I'm the co-founder and CEO of Blueground. Blueground is a prop tech company. We started in Greece, and since then we've come what we think is a long way. We offer beautifully designed apartments for stays of a month or longer. We now have about 3,500 apartments in 12 cities around the world. That includes United States, Europe, and Middle East. It is our jurisdictions. We raised more than 78 million in equity financing. And and I think that's one example, as we were saying before, of a company started in Greece but becoming international. Before starting the business, I worked as a consultant with McKinsey for about 6.5 years. 5 of them, I was traveling around the world, and that was where the inspiration for the company originated. Because I stayed in hotels, I stayed in different apartments, and I didn't really find a good solution. It was very costly and not ideal. So that's the background. That's my background, the background of the business. Looking forward, we still feel that we're really early days. We have a lot of more growth to achieve, many different cities and different countries to launch going forward. So that's the background. In terms, I just want to add to Kevin's point. Obviously, the lower cost and the availability of really strong talent is really important, and that's something that we also experienced in Blueground. And I think that was important because with the same amount of capital as other players in the space, we're able to do 3 to 4 more times capital efficient. So we went much further along, and that was really acknowledged and really valued by the investors that participate in our late. So that was an important thing to take note. the fact that you can do much more with less. Another two more points I would like to add is, the first one is around starting from a smaller market like Greece can actually be beneficial. And why is that? Because Athens, in our case, where we launched, is a less competitive market than some of the bigger markets. So it's easier to capture initial market share, but also to attain market leadership. And that typically leads to faster market profitability. And that gives additional confidence to the business and to investors to continue supporting the business as it scales. And this is actually something that, and Nikitas can chip in on that, but in the US, many American startups start in smaller cities, secondary and tertiary cities, in order to achieve some kind of good position in the market, develop the product, and then expand elsewhere. So I think that's another point to add. And I think one more point in terms of why Greece is a good market is because exactly with a small market, we have to think of international expansion early on. So we expanded really early on, and that we built the business and we built the organization in a way that can expand in several places faster. So that is a couple of points just to add to Kevin's point.
Alexandros, thank you so much. That was very clear, and we know that with the investors' help and support, Apostolos, Kevin, and a bunch more, you have really made it happen. I'll come back to you in a second. Thanos, a short, brief intro of yourself, and what is your view? You're calling from Athens, right?
Thank you, Jimmy. First of all, thank you for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here. My name is Thanos Papangelis. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Epignosis. Personally, I have an engineering background, and I consider myself a creative person. So I would say that I approach entrepreneurship as a way to express my creativity. It might be different from other people. The company I co-founded, Epignosis, is a software company. We are building educational technology software. In essence, we are helping companies, mid-sized companies, to train their people in a more efficient way. We are currently having over 8,000 customers around the globe. 60% of them are based in the United States, but we also have many customers in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and in most countries actually in the world. Just to give you an idea, in Greece, we have just 20 customers. So the company is by definition an international company. So for the biggest part of the company life, we were not backed by any VC. It was mostly friends and family and a small income stream. So that created the DNA around good unit economics. And that helped us actually create a company that at scale is profitable, which is not very common actually. Since 2017, we started having a lot of international interest from VCs and PEs around the world, and we completed 2 rounds actually of financing from 2 US-based PE firms, one of which is Inside Ventures. In total, we have raised a bit over $58 million. So around your question, I would say that for me personally, it's not impossible actually to create a big business, a substantial tech business in Greece. For example, there are a few examples. The e-commerce aggregators groups have done it, has created a big business in Greece. However, in most cases, the sheer size of the market here in Greece, it's not sufficient to build a big business. Traditionally, Greek entrepreneurs were afraid of scaling outside the Greece because it was considered very dangerous and with a lot of complexity. And it might be easier actually to do business with local networks and local government. However, my experience at least is that it's possible actually. It's less complex than initially someone believes. Assuming we have a good product and you have a good market, a good go-to-market strategy, it is possible to create a product that can grow internationally and attract customers. It's easier currently than ever before, actually, due to internet. Internet has turned the whole world to a small village, and things that could not be happening a few years ago currently is possible.
Excellent. Apostole, you have many, many gems in your portfolio. One of those is Blueground and many, many more. We'll talk about the lastly successful one in terms of time. But what is your view about the Greek market? Is it small? Should international scaling be the norm?
Yes, just a quick summary of my background. So I was an entrepreneur first in the tech space, first e-commerce, then e-marketplaces, the food delivery, doctor-patient marketplace. Gradually became an angel investor. And after the sale of eFood in 2015, we launched the first Venture Friends, the first venture capital fund in Greece with private money, 20 million fund. And then we raised the second fund, Venture Friends, in 2018, 50 million euros. We had the honor and privilege to back some great founders like Alexandros or John from InstaShop and others. We plan to continue doing that by raising our third fund. So that's about my story. So answering your question, clearly, I think it has been already been raised as a point that Greece is a small market. Only few businesses can reach like a certain size by addressing the local market, maybe food delivery, which is like a very big market, or price comparison. Scrooge is another actually successful example of a US investment from CVC. But the fact that Greece is as it is clearly pushes people to think internationally, think globally, and launch an international business. What we had up to now, and Thanos alluded to it, was probably a risk aversity on some part of the founders. So some founders thought it's very hard to launch international business. Maybe they didn't have the successful case studies that Thanos, Alexandros, and some other great founders have provided, also workable in the past or beat. I think there is a shift in the mentality, in the drive that people have, and the fact that they can see that many companies have made it makes it more possible, and induces more people, more founders to go after it. So yes, they can, they should, and they are. Many founders are thinking globally from day one, and that's why I'm also very optimistic, because we will see more and more of those successes in the future.
Excellent. And I think the contribution of people like you, Kevin, Ryan, Nikitas, and Thanos to the ecosystem, to people like Alexandros, with whom we have been working closely the last 5 years, is unfathomable of value, is value adding, generally speaking, and nothing would have happened without your contribution. So thank you so much for that, for all of you. And Nikitas, last but not least for this question, what is your view about the Greek market after you give us a brief intro about yourself and your background?
Sure, and thank you for having me. I was born and raised in Piraeus. I moved to the US when I was 18, primarily because I was the only person in Piraeus who was a Panathinaikos fan, so I had to leave.
We're out of time, Nikita. We're out of time, Nikita. Just joking.
I started at McKinsey, started a tech company after business school, and joined Insight Partners back in 2001. I spent the first decade at Insight building and co-running the part of the firm that helps our portfolio post-investment, which is now about 70 people, and the second decade focusing on deals. At Insight, Insight has about 33 billion under management at the moment. About 500 companies in our history, which is 25 years, about 280 companies in the portfolio today. And the way we find these companies is we have about 25 to 30,000 conversations every year, out of which we have about 2,000 to 3,000 serious conversations, out of which we find about 45 investments to make directly, and another 50 to 60 companies that we purchase on behalf of another portfolio company. So the funnel is quite large and very thin at the bottom. And we track companies. We're geographically agnostic, so we will look at companies globally as long as they meet kind of the growth profile for software that we invest in. And I would say that 5-6 years ago, Greek companies were few and far between. A decade ago, they were almost non-existent in our funnel. Our first investment in a Greek company was Epignosis in almost exactly 2 years ago. but the funnel is also increasing. The number of Greek companies that shows up in our pipeline meetings is increasing, which says something about the ecosystem and what it's done to promote entrepreneurship. I think other panelists have mentioned that the structural advantages. I would add that turning the disadvantages on their heads also makes a big difference. It's because of the crisis that a lot of people turn into making into entrepreneurship in the first place, not just as founders, but as members of the team. It's because of the crisis that companies had to be leaner than they are in Silicon Valley, because there was not enough money to go around. But the resulting quality of companies, I think, is excellent, which is why we're extremely active in the market and trying to build relationships with firms like Venture Friends, so that we become kind of the next stage in the development of these types of growth stage companies, enable them to grow outside. But I do think that both because of a lot of hard work and because of structural advantages, the ecosystem is quite strong today and becoming stronger.
Thank you so much, Nikitas. That was very clear. And if I may add something here, is that the common denominator of all the fellow co-panelists is humbleness. You have achieved a lot. You have an amazing track record, beginning with you, Kevin, and Nikita, Thanos, Alexandros, Apostolakis. I'm humbled by your humbleness yourself. Kevin, humbly speaking, you said something about a $20 billion company. You said about 30, 40 ventures, startups that you have put on an orbit of success. How did you do it? We have many startuppers and many entrepreneurs out there in the audience right now that would love to know what's a recipe of success. How did you make it happen?
Well, first of all, between the age of 32 and 41, I was involved with one company, DoubleClick, and I got very lucky because that company did extremely well. And I learned a lot because there was the first 4 years, crazy success, went from 0 to 2,000 employees in 25 countries in 4 years from a standing start. That's the good part. The second part is then we fired 1,000 people over the next 2.5 years when the internet bubble collapsed. The stock went from $130 down to $5. And so there's a lot of learnings there as well. And then it came back and we sold it successfully. I used that everything I had learned, good and bad, over those 9 years. And there were many mistakes we made, and obviously many things went well, and started to apply that with some pattern recognition on other startups. And so in 2007, I started a few companies, worked with them, and then only in the last 5 years, I've accelerated this and just tried to learn from, when you're old like I am by this point, you try and use some of the experience and scars you have on your back and try and do a better job. And I think, not everything works, but a lot of things are working. And it's also been very lucky because the last 25 years has been an incredible period in technology, in startups, in capital formation, and being in the United States was a good place to be. Now I think that's going to move, and success is going to be in places like Greece, in Poland, in Southeast Asia, in other countries. More growth will occur there.
So if I may take something from that, out of that, is move forward in a confident fashion, work tirelessly, so hard work, and learn from your mistakes. Would you agree on these?
Yeah, and also, there's building relationships too, because over time you build a reputation of either being nice to work with or not. Either people have worked for you, people have worked with you, partners, and over time that can help you or hurt you. And so hopefully that's gone well for me. I have a lot of repeat people I've worked with more than once, repeat partners, and trying to keep learning, because obviously the framework today is very different than 15 years ago. Types of businesses, the trends, things like that. So you have to keep learning, keep adapting, keep reading, and realize that you're always going to make some mistakes. You're like a professional athlete. You're gonna make a bunch of mistakes, but if you do better than other people, you'll end up okay.
Thank you so much. Very clear and so helpful. Going the other way around, and since I'm humbled of Kevin and all of you, but Kevin is the only non-Greek in the room. Nikita, may I go to you now? And I have a question for you, a specific one targeted for you. Scale-ups are on the most difficult part of the journey. turning initial viability into exponential growth and long-term success. A decision can mean flight or free fall. What is your advice for the Greek startups? We need that.
You make it sound very dramatic. I would actually argue that yeah, it's hard to scale a company. There's, you know, our portfolio is made out of people who, you know, a lot of people who wake up every day and saying, I've never run a company this big before. And that kind of sense, part of it is humility, but part of it is recognizing that you cannot do it alone. Perhaps because I don't do early stage investing the way Apostolos does, I actually think that early stage is harder because first of all, the success rate is even lower than the growth stage. And there's much less patent recognition. We, as a firm, focus in growth stage software companies precisely because there is patent recognition. We can take something that is, you know, that I don't mean to trivialize, it is very hard, but help people do it because we've seen the movie before. There's a lot of principles to follow, obviously, in early stage as well. But as things scale up, things become more replicable. You can take lessons from one company and apply them in the other. They do not have to be doing the exact same thing. And you can build, you know, investing firms around these types of principles so that the fact that you're investing actually affects the odds of success beyond what your capital does.
Clear. Thank you so much. That's so useful. And I mean, the risk is so high in smaller companies. However, we've seen that it's possible, it's feasible. But people say it's 1 out of 11, 1 out of 100 in the earlier stages. We've seen that it's a lot better in the Greek startups. However, scalability is a question. And speaking of support,
but sorry, on that point, and it relates a lot to what Kevin just said. It's also important to understand that failure is also something that sometimes you cannot control, part of the game, and not the end of the game. And coming from, you know, I hope that as the ecosystem evolves, the social price of entrepreneurial failure actually decreases down to zero. So many people, I mean, Kevin's story at DoubleClick, although DoubleClick was a larger company, but you have to deal with it as part. That does not mean the game's over. There's many more iterations to come if you've built the right team around you, the right principles, and you work hard.
Focusing on Greece, I would say that pride versus failure are two opposite concepts. So we're working on that. And now the next question is for Thanos. Thanos, company cultures. We know the company culture of Facebook. I mean, we've heard of it. We know the company culture of Google, Apple. We have heard amazing stories about the company culture of Blueground under the leadership of Alexandros, Taxi Beat now, eFood. How are good company cultures created and how these affect the startup's future per se?
Culture is a tough question. And personally, I have struggled a lot around culture in the past. It's also an important topic and becomes more important as the company grows. When you think around culture in a concrete way, it becomes obvious that it's something that already exists, even if you have not taken the time to write it down or to formalize it. It is about the collective moral values of the people in the company, how you treat people and customers, how your preference around conflicting priorities. In essence, it's about people's DNA and how compatible this DNA is with founders. Founders are very important because they give the tone. So for me, at least, culture boils down to two things. You need to hire wisely, hire people with high moral standards with which you share the same view around life and business. And B, you need to lead by example. It's not what you are saying, it's what you are doing. If you are not treating customers with respect, you cannot expect your people to treat them with respect. A good culture leads to a healthy environment where people see opportunities and where meritocracy prevails. That leads, in my opinion, to more loyalty, to people that stay with you for many years, and that translates to a bigger probability of success. I believe that people that work together for many years start having a kind of superpower. They communicate easier, decisions become faster, and trust is increased. So a good culture leads to loyalty, which leads to bigger probability of success.
Clear. That was clear. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Apostole. Let me, Apostole.
Yeah.
Here you are. So, Apostole, although Blueground is one of the Greek and European ecosystem's favorites as a gem, as an amazing company, part of your portfolio was and is InstaShop. InstaShop was acquired for $360 million US, the largest deal for a Greek startup. What is your right recipe for a successful startup in Greece? Did you use money and funds smartly, or was this smart money?
I mean, InstaShop is a rare example of a company that didn't really use a lot of money. So they just raised $7 million and within 5 years created a $360 million company. So clearly they were very efficient about it. They clearly learned something from the Greek paradigm, because one of the key things about starting from a smaller ecosystem is that you're frugal, you're scrappy, you're making the best use of what you have. So in general, the recipe for any startup, I think most people can relate to what are the requirements for a startup to be successful. Additionally, for a company started from Greece, there are 3 cases, by the way, just to be clear. There's one case like Blueground. So you start in Greece, you test the market, and then you go internationally. There's the case of Thanos, Epignosis, where you start global from day one. Epignosis or Workable are good examples of companies that started from Greece. They built a product and they start selling a software as a service product. And then there's the case of a Greek team that launches in a new market where there is higher compatibility with the same specific product, like InstaShop. They launched in Dubai from day one. In the cases where you launch directly internationally, then you already have this sense of urgency. You understand you're competing already at a global scale. So one extra thing to be considered, and it's a prerequisite for success if you're starting in Greece, because starting in Greece and catering to the local market can make you a bit complacent. You don't see the competition right away. So you need to maintain that sense of urgency. You need to keep that bar high in terms of the people you hire, how you develop your product. And this is very important. Blueground is a great example of a company that had a very high standard from day one. So they naturally launched international markets and they were able to do well by keeping that high standard. But generally speaking, as a Greek founder, you have to be more persistent. You have to try harder. You have to prove a bit more when you're trying to raise more funding. So I think that's a disadvantage, but it's also an advantage. It builds character in the process.
That's so clear. And both Blueground and InstaShop are our favorites as well. Envolve is part of Blueground and vice versa. And I have a question from the audience. Which may I take? So from George Koutoupes. Hi, I am a Greek American who has started a rapidly growing business in Atlanta, Georgia. After further expansion here, I would like to consider expanding to Greece. Could you comment on moving into Greece, how to navigate regulations, etc.? Are these services that help entrepreneurs move into? Are there services that help entrepreneurs move into Greece?
I mean,
I think
I can
yes.
quickly answer that. I think clearly it's also difficult to start and navigate things in Greece. And I can tell you because we started companies like 10 years ago. In essence, apart from the small bureaucracy of setting up a company, then everything is very, very easy, right? So it's not like a complicated thing, especially if you're a Greek American. I'm sure you know somebody in Greece who can give you an extra hand, but it's not so difficult to do that.
Absolutely. Before I go ahead and open the floor to do more interaction, I should mention something to the organizers. I have received several remarks about the diversity of this panel, and although all of you guys are successful, we have been receiving these comments about diversity, as I said. Since the same comments were made last June under a different theme, it was a CSR panel, I think. Please, next time, consider bringing and inviting the so many, we have many Greek or Greek American, or why not international ladies, successful ladies in entrepreneurship as well. So please consider inviting them as well. No offense to the panelists, I had to bring this to your attention, Nicholas and Olga, because there was a number of questions and remarks and comments made for this. And I know that the Capital Link is a very diverse company itself.
And frankly, one of the things we have learned being in the US is we live in a very diverse society, and we love it.
Let's also convert that into invitations for keynote speakers and panelists. Thank you so much. Apostole, what would you ask Kevin as a co-investor, as an investor, a fellow investor, about Greece, about trends, outlooks, about startups generally speaking?
So what would I ask Kevin about Greece?
Yes, let's make this interesting.
Well,
I mean,
I think I should really ask you,
yes,
because you know more about Greece than I do, about the fundamental trends you're seeing in the Greek market that we may not be aware of.
Yeah, I mean, I think Greece is not that it's so separated or isolated from the rest of the world. I think the basic startup themes that we see in other regions are also happening in Greece. We probably are a bit more skewed currently towards B2C startups starting up, but we have great examples of B2B companies at B2B in the B2B space, like Epignosis or Workable and many more starting up. I think what I would ask Kevin is not about the trends in Greece. It would be about what he has seen and why he would be bullish about the Greek ecosystem, which he already alluded to earlier, and whether he has other ecosystems to compare Greece with, other peripheral ecosystems in Europe, maybe, that he has seen.
Look, I think one thing we're seeing across the board is startup activity is actually increasing in every single country. There is no country where it's going down. The surprise is looking at Europe has been that Berlin 15 years ago, no one thought of as a startup center, and now is really one of these startup centers. And you can operate there, in English, which brings in people from Hungary, from Romania, from all over, which has been great. The French ecosystem is growing quite nicely. They're probably the most aggressive in supporting companies and giving money to the banks and creating funds. And I don't know if Greece has done that, but France has done that pretty aggressively. UK has the obvious advantage of a lot of money there and financing. Italy has been a real laggard. So, for a country of over 60 million people, it has surprisingly few great startups. And Spain is sort of in the middle. We're seeing, Barcelona is becoming a startup center. It's a place, by the way, that Athens shares. It's a place that people want to live. And that's a big plus. And so you're starting to see more international people moving to Barcelona. And at the end of the day, if you want to truly be a startup center, you need to attract people who are not from your country. And that's hard in Europe. Berlin has done that. Barcelona's doing a little bit. I think Athens is doing that a little bit, but could do more over time.
I think the government is working on that as we speak. I have a question for Alexandros. Good evening, everyone. It is an honor being here. My question is for Mr. Alexandros Chatzieleftheriou. Why the team execution of a company is more important than the main idea?
Sure. I think if you ask the investors in the panel, they would tell you that they would rather invest in a great team with an average idea rather than an average team with a great idea. The reason for that is, especially in the early days, for a startup to become successful, it's very common to pivot and change directions and do different things depending on what they find in the market until they find what we call the product market fit. So when you have a great team that executes really well, yeah, you can be confident that they will make the adjustments necessary and they will do what's needed to be successful. So we bet on the great team that can deliver very good execution that will lead to success in the long run.
Excellent. Thank you so much. The questions are pouring. Maria Gabriela, what is your crisis management basic strategy? How do you respond to crisis with the pandemic, recession, etc.? And I think, Nikita, you must have a very, very interesting answer to this one.
Jimmy, if you allow me, because we're out of time, let's address this question quickly. And
yes, thank you so much, Nicholas.
I apologize that I have to
summarize it for me real quick. I didn't catch it.
So, contingent crisis management. How do you approach crises in your company? What is a good strategy for dealing with crises like the pandemic, like recession, etc.?
I think it's building the business to be resilient from day one. So it's not trying to find an answer once the crisis has started, but creating contingencies, hedging risk, and more importantly, perhaps being extremely focused on strategy. If you do one thing and you do it extremely well, then you can deal with adversities a lot better than having many balls in the air when something happens. It also gets connected to what Alexandros just said, that if you have the right folks on the team, if you have world-class people surrounding you, it's just a function of who can do what and who can help you manage anything. So the quality of your collaborators is critical.
Excellent. My sincere apologies for all the questions that are pouring in. We won't have time to respond to them. May I please thank you all for your contribution to this discussion. Kevin, thank you so much for vouching for Greek economy. This government is doing a lot. Nicholas, thank you for the panel. Nikita, Thanos, Alexandros, and of course, Apostolos, who contributed a lot to this, to the creation of this panel. Thank you so much, Nicholas.
Thank you, guys. Thank you to all of you very much. And really appreciate the tremendous insight.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.